Welcome back to the Spiritual Uplevel Podcast. I'm your host, Jeri Cristine, and I am so excited today to be bringing you this special guest all the way from Canada, Miriam Rachel. She is a freelance writer, author. She's a tarot reader. She has been involved with spirituality for quite some time, and she is an avid mental health advocate. And she likes to speak about the toxicity that is found in spiritual communities, which is an exciting topic that I also want to talk about. We can get lost so easily in to think is to create, and everything should be positive when you're on this path, and that's just simply not true. And so I'm excited to have that conversation with you today. Before we get started on that path, can you just tell me a little bit about how you got started? Tell us about your background.
Well, okay. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on your show. And secondly, my goodness, I'm not even sure where to begin, but I'll just say this much. I've always been different, I guess. Yeah. And I don't know. I hated it when I was younger because I was I was scapegoated, bullied, and all that, which caused me a lot of trauma. But at the same time, I remember when I was 16, I went to a psychic fair and I was very, very interested in it. But at that time, I didn't think I was actually going to get into that. I just felt really attracted to it. I didn't really start getting into any of this until after my daughter was born, which was over 22 years ago now. And that's when I started dabbling into tarot and astrology. And then I just dived right into it. I started practicing tarot readings with friends and just honed my skills. Now, there was a time when I had to put a lot of that on hiatus because I was going through some unimaginable issues that I've talked about on my shows a lot. And I will get to that at some point. But anyway, I'll just say as well, because of the fact that I didn't fit in, I was so desperate. Now, we're going to go back a little bit now before even my daughter was a thought, right? I was so desperate for people to like me that I became an extreme people pleaser, which is also known as an echoist. Okay. Echoism is the polar opposite of classic narcissism, whereas classic narcissism, you only care about yourself. You don't give a crap about anyone else. You have no empathy for anyone. But with echoism, everybody else is in the spotlight, but you just keep giving of yourself and you just don't even realize you have needs. So yeah, you're basically a doormat, and that's the truth. But anyway, so yeah, that I struggled with, and I got out of it when I reached a catalyst, like I now going fast forward. Because after my daughter was born, I had a son too that has complex special needs, and I wasn't able to take care of him. I did everything I could. I did my best, but at 13, I had no choice but to surrender him to a therapeutic environment. So that was it was a life and death situation. I'll just say that. And that was the reason I put all my spiritual stuff on hiatus because I was in such a bad state that it was scary. I'll just say it was really frightening. So here I was doing something that was going to go against society's expectations because society expects you to be a caregiver forever for kids with with special needs forever. It's even expected that even if you die, you have to come back as a ghost to take care of them. I'm not joking. I wish I was, but I'm not.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the expectation. So you and I, believe me, I've been chastised for what I did, but I you know what? I don't care. I did what was best for everyone. My son was not going to be safe staying at home. My daughter was suffering. Um, so that was my breaking point as far as my big tower moment, you can say, that basically broke me out of my egoism. Now, it wasn't a case where I um just woke up the next day after he left and said, "Oh my goodness, I'm not an egoist anymore." No, no, no. It was very gradual. I started developing boundaries. I didn't even realize it, but over the years I started developing boundaries. Now this happened in 2017. Um I just started to pay attention to what I needed. I started asserting myself more. It was just natural. It was, and I didn't even realize it was happening. So now this bridges to the toxic positivity, spiritual bypassing issues, because, as I got back into my spirituality and my tarot and all that, um, I started getting more into the communities. And I was really not happy with what I was seeing. I was told that I planned all the trauma, all the bullying and all the trauma that I went through. No, I didn't. Because they just love to gaslight you. And I do believe spiritual narcissism is a real problem in the New Age community. So they toss all kinds of toxic positivity at you, spiritual bypassing and gaslighting, victim blaming, all that. But they do it in a way where I call it toxic spirituality wrapped in or victim blaming wrapped in a toxic spiritual bow. That's what I call it, because you've got a lot of these so-called mediums saying, well, you do realize that before your incarnation, your soul chose to go through all that. So you're not really a victim in anything. Oh, really? Why don't you tell that to those who went through even worse trauma than I did?
So do you believe that, because I'm obviously very familiar with that too. I
Mhm.
actually remember choosing part of my life, not the specific traumas, but my parents and things like that.
Yes,
So,
yes. Hmm.
and you agree with that. Like you
Yeah,
part of your life, but
I
not
do. I do.
trauma. Okay.
This is what I feel happens. Now, the thing is, we can't prove it because I can't say it's the absolute truth, but I'll just say intuitively, this is what I think happens. Yes, I do believe you have soul contracts. And you know what? If there's going to be messy karma that you make a soul contract with someone to, you know, um, solve it or balance it with, but you can't plan how that's going to look. Okay. So I always like to compare it to, and it's so funny because I'm not a sports person at all, but I always compare it to two football teams. The their objective is to win. Okay. So the objective may be to balance the karma. So you got team A and you got team B. Okay, we know there's going to be a challenge, but we don't know how that's going to look. But you can't plan. You can't plan how that's going to happen, what's going to go on. You can't plan that someone from team A is going to get injured by someone by team B. You're not going to get plan. You can't plan that someone from team B could also be injured by someone from team A or whatever. That's that's the thing. There's free will. And I
Gonna
feel,
say that. That makes sense because
yeah,
that allows for the free will
yeah.
portion.
So So say if you have a soul contract with a parent that was abusive, okay? The way I see it is that there's some ugly karma there and they feel it. So they may not be evolved enough to do the right thing. So they may misuse their free will and you get caught in the crossfire. So that's
Mhm.
what happens. That's what I believe happens. So no, you don't plan for these things. I believe that when you do plan for your life, there's a risk, but that's the extent of it.
Wow, that's interesting. Um, yeah, because I've always been told as well that you plan all of these, major events that are going to happen. And I can see, like you're saying, like the karma, like a karmic debt or a soul contract might be the plan. But then if we have free will, which I believe we do have free
Mhm.
will,
100%. Yeah.
you couldn't completely plan that. And I've had experiences like in my life, I was sexually abused by a babysitter as a child.
Okay.
And also, I talk about I do coaching around victim versus responsible. And there's things that I don't go to. Like, yes, you're a victim if you're a child abused, like there's just things where you're absolutely a victim. And
Yeah.
and for somebody to say otherwise is is just not right. Now, do you learn something from that? Can you grow? Does your soul evolve? I absolutely. And that doesn't take away the fact that in some situations you have no control and therefore no responsibility, even if it's before life and choosing that thing happening. So,
Yeah. I mean, I suppose, I mean, that's a real dicey thing because the thing is, yeah, the potential like post-traumatic growth is a thing, but not everybody is able to experience that. And that's not their fault. It has nothing to do with how quote unquote evolved they are. Some people are so traumatized that they just survive. They just can't. Yeah. So, I mean, that's who I like to stand up for because not everybody is going to not everyone's going to be handling. Now, I know I've done some past life regressions. I know I've got some nasty karma with my son, and I totally understand why he came into my life. It was very ugly, but at the same time, my daughter, we're like soulmates, right? So she's been my rock, and I don't know where I would be if I didn't have that. Now, the thing is, I think if you're going to plan a challenging life, and I do say yeah, if you're going to be making soul contracts with those who you do have karma with, like the negative karma, it's not going to be easy. So you absolutely have to have those who are going to support you, right? I mean, think about team A and team B. You've got the team members supporting each other. It's sort of the same thing, right? So I do believe that if you're going to have a difficult life, you do need to have pillars. I mean, you do. So,
wow, fascinating. And so another thing that you mentioned was toxic positivity.
mm,
Um, I experienced I want you to explain what that is first. In your words, what is
yeah,
toxic?
sure. It's basically telling you, it's invalidating your real emotions by telling you you only have to be positive. There's got to be silver linings in everything. But no, not everything has silver linings. I'm sorry. You know?
So I experienced this originally, man, how long has it been? 15, 20 years ago when the movie The Secret came out.
Oh,
In my group of friends, it was such a big thing, like, oh my gosh, we have control over our lives. To think is to create all of this, which I think, some of that is good. However,
mhm,
I was living in Arizona and it maybe came out in say 2007. And then in 2008, the real estate market crashed and we were all
mm,
in real estate. We were all lenders and realtors and stuff. And all of a sudden, we had no control over something. And we were, like, how is this my fault? Why did I not think positively enough? Like all of these things. And I came to realize, like, while that is somewhat true, there's also things in the world that you can't control.
no,
And and so to believe that just your mindset can control every single aspect of how you experience this life is very misleading and can cause a lot of problems. So tell me about what you see with that, what you've seen and how you
you
respond.
mean with the secret specifically?
Sure.
Okay. Well, here's the only thing that I believe there is some truth to it. And I also want to make it clear that yeah, you don't attract every bad thing that happens. You don't attract every good thing that happens. I've seen so many bullies and abusers get away with so much, and it makes me want to scream, but whatever. Um, um, so yeah, and the other thing is if you do everything right, you do your best, you're in a good mindset, you can still get into a car accident or something. I mean, that's you didn't attract that. It just crap happens, right? Crap happens.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so anyway, so as far as the only thing that I might agree with when it comes to The Secret is that I do think that what you do focus on does expand. Okay, because when you're in a really negative mindset, like when I was struggling caring for my son, when you are in a really negative mindset, you're going to attract, I mean, I don't like to use that word, but you're going to come into situations that are going to be ugly. You're emitting very negative energies because you are, and then you're going to, get yourself into some bad situations. It's like, say, for instance, if you're in a really bad mindset, you give into addictions more. Now, I also understand that addiction is a disease. I get it, but those who work on it can work on it, and it's not easy. or you just get into really bad habits that can become addictions, I guess. I mean, I want to be careful with how I word things because I don't want to, last thing I want to do is sound like I'm putting out any kind of toxic positivity. But you'll eat more, you'll spend more. Next thing you know, you gain a lot of weight, which happened to me. I've always struggled with my weight. I've always yo-yo dieted. Now I'm diabetic too, which did I attract that? Well, yes and no. The thing I'll get to that after. But anyway, um so yeah, I mean that's the thing. You're in a bad mindset, your actions will cause you to do things that will self-destruct. And I think that's what I mean by what you focus on expands.
Sure. Well, what you focus on, I always have this vision of when you're focusing on a problem, it's almost like you have like pinhole vision, and that's all that you can see. And if you can just move back away from that problem a little bit, you can see other possibilities. And so you can shift your perspective. Two people can be in the same situation and see it very differently and have a different reaction to it. And if it's negative or positive, it's going to create more of whatever you're focusing on. So that makes sense. What if somebody finds themselves in a situation where they have, experienced this toxic positivity or victim blaming, that sort of thing? What do you recommend that people do? Like first of all, how do they recognize it if
Yeah.
they're in it? And then what do they do from there?
I think it's really important that people understand what it is first, because if they don't understand, they're going to believe it. Okay. They're going to believe it. They're going to question themselves. They're going to gaslight themselves into believing that they need to be positive all the time, that they're not victims of anything. So I think, honestly, knowledge is the key. And the thing is, your feelings are valid, all of them. And yes, you're not going to, you're not always going to have positive feelings. You're human. You're going to have times when you're feeling angry, resentful, jealous. I mean, that's part of
Mhm.
being human. And don't shove it down. Just let it process. I mean, staying there, yeah, it will fester if you if you let it take over, it'll fester. That's not good either. But feel it, let it process, and tell those off who try to gaslight you into believing that you need to be positive or to get over it.
That's such a good point. I've talked about that with a lot of my guests actually, that sometimes those of us in this world, the healers and the coaches, feel like we need to be positive and have it all together all the time. But
Mhm.
the truth is we're all humans. We all have bad things happen to us. We all have emotions. And I mean, they're God-given emotions. They're here for a reason. And the worst thing we can do is deny them and stuff them down and pretend like we don't have them, because then that becomes the thing that you really have to process through later because of all the stuffing it and denying it. Where if you can just feel the emotion, feel what you're going through, reach out for help. Like you said, every sports team has support, every player has support. Reach out for your support and process through that and allow it to happen, just knowing that it's a natural part of this human existence. And then you can move forward in a more positive
Yeah.
way, being
Yeah.
more true to yourself.
I
Yeah.
also I also want to mention something else important. If you've been through any kind of loss, it doesn't just mean loss of a loved one. I'm talking about a dream. You're going to grieve, and you have to grieve. And don't let anyone tell you that you got to get over it. No. And you're going to be grieving potentially for the rest of your life. But the difference is that when you do finally get to acceptance, it doesn't end there, but you understand it better. Doesn't mean you like it, but it just means it is what it is. I mean, that's the thing. I've had to do that with my son, and I can tell you that a lot of my negative mindset was because I was so thick in the grief over everything, right?
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And like you said, if somebody's telling you that you need to get over it, that's probably a red flag
oh
that
yeah.
that person doesn't know what they're talking about. And to find somebody that will sit with you and hold space for you to just process through those sort of things. Have your how has your like tarot reading and astrology helped you and your clients through things that they're
Well,
going through?
well, it just gives them gives me and them a different perspective. See that there is something bigger going on, and seeing that you understand that life is going to just throw some curveballs at you. And it doesn't matter whether you quote unquote planned it or not. It's just the way it is, and you're going to feel how you feel, right? So it's just more of a gaining a different perspective about it all. So, and I think that is pretty helpful. I'm also about to say something that's going to be controversial to a lot of people, especially those in the New Age community. But I don't believe that anyone, any victim has, or any survivor, whatever, should have the burden of being responsible for forgiving their bullies or abusers. Mhm.
Okay.
I understand some will say, but don't you realize that you're drinking that poison and expecting the other one to die? No. I'm not saying to stew in resentment and plot revenge. That's such a black and white way of thinking. I think the best way you can handle it is just become indifferent. Just nope, don't care. The reason I mean, I know semantics is probably a big thing too, but the fact of the matter is when you are forgiving somebody, you're finding compassion in it. And basically, and I do feel like, yes, it's a free pass. You're compassionate. And I honestly, I don't care what kind of trauma that bullies and abusers have been through. If they are cognitively able to know what they're doing, they know what they're doing. And they don't they absolutely don't deserve forgiveness if the victim doesn't want to forgive them. If it helps the victim, that's fine. You got to do what's best for you. But I feel like you don't have to do that, and that is a burden because I've seen so many who have been through abuse, like so many CPTSD individuals get really, really upset about the fact that they just can't forgive their abuser, even though they do their best. And it's like, you don't need to. Don't let anyone gaslight you. Just move forward with your life. Just, try to put it away and just move on. I mean, you do not have to forgive those who hurt you. It does not mean, again, that you're stewing in resentment or plotting revenge. It doesn't mean that. It just means you don't have to have that responsibility. It is a burden.
I want to take that one step further. I have been able to forgive.
Okay. Hmm.
A process, a long process. I do, and it was helpful, and it wasn't something that I did. It was an experience that God, my higher self, something, it happened in an instant. Um, After working on it for decades, not working on forgiveness, working on my own self and
Hmm.
understanding my story. And and for me, like I believe that your biggest challenge is right next to your greatest strength or your greatest superpower. And so like for me, turning what happened bad in my life, like like healing from that full circle, has become helping other people heal from that. And so in that respect, um I'm not grateful, definitely not grateful, but I can see that the good that came from that thing. And so it allows me to have a different perspective of it. I totally agree with you that it's not required and that people shouldn't feel pressured to be able to do that. Because I don't, from my own experience, I don't think that you can will yourself to forgive somebody, you
Hmm.
know? Like I said, for me, it was years of processing, lots of work. And then one day in a meditation, actually, I just had this experience and my whole perspective on it changed, but it wasn't something that I did. And so I think you're completely right because I feel that pressure of feeling like you have to forgive creates resentment.
Hmm.
even towards your own self. Like,
Yep.
what's wrong with me?
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with you, and when you're victimized, you're right, you don't have to forgive. Hopefully someday you can have a different perspective. And if that comes, great. And if it never comes, that's fine too. Let's work, like, let's help you feel whole and loved and safe where you're at today. And that's the most important
Well,
thing.
the thing is, when I have a conviction, I stand by it. Leo Sun, Taurus Moon, okay? So no, I mean, I've always felt this way, and even though I've done a lot of work on myself, that hasn't changed. But I will say that I used to be very vengeful. I used to
Yeah,
be, I used to. Now it doesn't interest me because I've got better things to do. And
yeah,
how is that going to help? I mean, how is that going to help me? It
yeah,
didn't. Okay, I felt a little powerful, but at the same time, it doesn't erase the pain that they caused. Okay. So no, I mean, that's how I've definitely grown. I've got better things to do. It just makes you look bad if you
yeah,
are vengeful. And I completely, I'm just working on just not caring, indifference. So because like I said, forgiveness, and listen, if it works for you, great. If it works for some people, it has to be genuine though. And that's fine. It's just for me, I don't see it. And like I said, I definitely stand by my convictions. I know I'm stubborn, but at the same time, it's not taking over my life. I'm still doing what I need to do?
yep. And that's the important thing, I think, is to
Yeah.
not get stuck there, because this
Yeah.
human experience is a journey, the journey of evolution and growth, and things happen. And I love that we had this conversation today, because it's some, like, people ask, how, like, if there's a God, why does God let bad things happen to good people? And the truth is, God, there's free will, and that has to come into play, because it is, this whole experience is not scripted. It's not like every single move you make is not scripted, and every single move you make, it's like the butterfly effect. Every single thing
Yep.
has, you don't have no idea the effect that it's going to have one day. And so that comes into play, and this only makes sense, that we can't choose everything, we can't be responsible for everything. Learning the lessons along the way is the ultimate goal. And ultimately, I always think, I want to speak to the creative director who came up with
Yeah,
this. You know,
seriously.
what's the point? I don't know. But I'm just trying to make the most of it, as are you, and I'm sure all of our listeners today. I have two questions before we go, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. But my
Sure.
first question is, do you have a book that you recommend that has impacted you, that you recommend that our listeners read?
Well, that's the thing. I do have a book that I love, but it's not really it's not fitting for what we're talking about.
That's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. It doesn't have to be.
It's because the thing is, another part of my tarot practice is I'm working on a way for people to use tarot to stir their creativity, right? Because I'm a writer too, right? So here's a book that I absolutely love, Tarot for Writers.
Okay.
Um, yeah, Corinne Kenner. So I absolutely love this. It has absolutely nothing to do with any, well, actually, that's not 100% true. There is a lot of stuff that does make you think and reflect as well, right?
Yeah,
So I absolutely love that book, and it has
absolutely.
been very helpful to me.
Our listeners are seekers like myself, and
Hmm.
so all the information, it's going to hit the right people. So,
Right, right.
um, and then finally, what is one thing that you wish everyone in the world knew?
To be authentic.
Ah,
There's just so much fakeness out there, right? Just to be authentic with your word, be authentic with how you feel, and don't let toxic positivity and spiritual bypassing take that away from you.
so good. Yeah. Authenticity. Every one of us is unique, and every one of us has our own unique gifts to offer to the world. And I just want to leave our listeners with, um, feel your feelings. They're all valid, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't feel a feeling, or you shouldn't feel a feeling. Feel it, you know that it's part of life, and you're going to move through it, but feel it, the good ones and the bad ones. And Miriam, how do people reach you if they'd like to get in touch with you?
Well, the easiest way is to reach me through beacons.ai/Miriam Rachel, beacons.ai/Miriam Rachel. And there's so many links to what I do. MiriamReadsTarot.com is another one. I'm also a writer on Medium, mizmir.medium.com, as you can find that on there. I'm on Substack, Miriam Reads Tarot Substack. So yeah.
All the places. I love
Yep.
it. Well,
Yep.
thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Yeah, definitely.